How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Jeremy.
All right, that is the notification that our Finance Committee meeting will start. I am Katie Logan Hedges, Chair of the Finance Committee. It is Tuesday, June 25th. With me this evening, I have committee members Jeff Hallinan and Tom Duval. We have council members Tom Kalitzka and Zach Brooks, the auditor, law director, and the mayor with us this evening. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. First thing on our agenda is to review the Finance Committee meeting minutes from June 4th that Melissa sent out. Are there corrections, comments, questions on those?
Move to approve.
All right, move to approve the minutes by Tom Duval,
Second.
seconded by Jeff Hallinan. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. All right, so we have 4 items on our agenda this evening. What I would like to do is switch the order. We would start with letter C first, then do D, and then A and B last. That would be the discussion surrounding the potential levy. So if that works for everyone, we will go ahead and start with item C. And Melissa, if you could please read the title.
An ordinance to authorize and implement the labor agreement between the non-uniformed employees organization and the city of Circleville.
Thank you, Melissa. With us this evening, we have the law director. I will turn it over to Ms. Kinney to give us some details of this.
Thank you, Councilperson Hedges. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, last week, obviously, we did have a private session meeting with full council to discuss the non-uniform employees labor agreement that has been prepared and pre-negotiated. Before you tonight would be the final terms of those agreements to be formally adopted by the Finance Committee, as well as then on to full council. Within those agreements were some provisions for increase in pay, as that has already been previously budgeted for and discussed by the city auditor, as well as some other incentives, other creative ways, strictly outside the scope of direct compensation to kind of aid our employees. So in its entirety here, you will have the draft versions of the agreement, as well as the proposed ordinance. Obviously, Mr. Bidwell is here, and he can address any of those questions as it relates to the city's finance obligation. The other terms and agreements have been identified with either some strike-through language, modification of language, or a new policy, which may result later in a memorandum of understanding just because of some of the deadlines that we had to meet. So if there are any questions that are presented, I can field those. If they're related to finance, then I am going to defer to the city auditor.
Thank you, Kendra. So again, 2 items to note. The agreement was included in your packet in its entirety. And then the other thing I wanted to call attention to that Kendra had mentioned again is these numbers tied to this agreement have been budgeted in the most recent budget version that we have seen. So other questions, comments, concerns for either the law director or for Mr. Bidwell, the auditor?
I thought they were pretty representative of last discussion.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mark, do you have anything that you want to add outside of the previous discussion or what the law director stated?
Nothing really. I think it's a good agreement, beneficial for both sides. So I'm happy with it. And again, we do have everything budgeted, so we're in good shape for that.
Great, thank you.
I'll make a motion to forward this to council on the 2nd of July with recommendations for acceptance.
All right, so that was recommended by Jeff Hallinan to move forward to council with a recommendation for passage.
Second.
Seconded by Tom Duval. Melissa, can we please do a roll call?
Hedges,
Yes,
Hallinan,
Yes.
Duval.
Yes.
thank you. Okay, if we can go on to the second item, which is B in the agenda. I also want to, was D in the agenda. I also want to call attention in the previous agenda that was sent out previously, we made an addition to this that we did accept up until the time that the meeting started today. So the title changed late this afternoon. What Melissa will read is the updated title. This was sent out to the listserv this morning in correction, and then the final correction that Melissa made this afternoon due to the addition was in the printed material, but you did not get it electronically. So if Melissa, you could read the revised ordinance, I would appreciate it.
An ordinance amending the annual appropriation ordinance in the general fund 101 legal research and computer maintenance fund 209 specialized docket subsidy grant fund 266 and capital improvement fund 306 of the city of Circleville.
Thank you, Melissa. So as always, Mark provided supplementary information as well as the summary housekeeping chart that line items out all the total costs associated with this housekeeping ordinance. This is the 9th one of the year. Mark, do you want to give an overview?
Yes, thank you. So we have a couple items in Fund 101 that we're looking to do some work at the High Street Cemetery. Jim Stanley requested some additional funds. There's some cleanup that needs to be done along the river there. Also, for one of the trucks that we're getting, we need a plow and the lights for the new service truck. So those are both included in that 101 for the 58,000 there. Next, which wasn't on the first report that was sent out, just came to the second one. ABM we currently have a quarterly maintenance that was not budgeted for. We missed it because of the fact of how it was set up when we set the ABM originally up. The first year was included with what we did. After that, we have a quarterly maintenance. So as a result, I needed to increase line or Fund 209 by $8,300 to pay the quarterly maintenance fee for ABM for the rest of the year. The next one is 306. If you skip 266, 306 is the other part of the ABM, which was $35,200. That's their portion of ABM quarterly maintenance. And going back to Fund 266, what that is, that is a grant fund or a dollars that come from, it's a grant fund, dollars that come to the city at, I think it's once a year, and it's usually in July. So the funds had not been appropriated yet to be able to use for payroll for that department, and that's for the municipal court. So we had to set aside additional monies there to finish off the payroll for the rest of the year. So that's what all the money is there for. We did reduce drug testing right now. We're not doing that. It will be increased later once those funds do arrive. And I talked to Judge Peters this morning about this, and the money will be reappropriated once that funds has arrived back from those grant dollars. And then finally, getting back to 306, sorry to jump around there, but just wanted to make sure everything kind of flowed there. There was an audit expense of $300 that was not budgeted for, or there wasn't enough money set aside initially for it. So that was in 306 as well. But the total increase is for 148.7, with again, majority of that being the cleanup for the High Street Cemetery and the payroll for the probation department under municipal court.
Perfect. Thank you. So just to recap again, out of the general fund, it's about $58,000, $8,300 out of the legal research and computer maintenance fund, $35,500 out of the capital improvement fund, and the remaining, which is just under, I think it's about $47,000 to that specialized docket subsidy grant fund. Any questions from Mark regarding those changes? If not, is there a motion?
I would move that we approve and send to council.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Tom Duval to approve,
I'll second that.
seconded by Jeff Hallinan. Melissa, can we please do a roll call?
Hedges,
Yes.
Hallinan,
Yes.
Duval.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we are moving right along. So next on our agenda would be letter A. Melissa, if you don't mind reading that, please.
Resolution to submit to the electors at a general election to be held on November 5th, 2024, an ordinance to replace the 0.5% income tax rate increase allocated for the purpose of operating and maintaining the safety forces in the city of Circleville to be expended for the safety forces prior to the funds allocated to the general fund with a 0.4% Annum income tax for a 5-year period to commence January 1st, 2025 and expiring December 31st, 2029, directing the Pickaway County Board of Elections to submit the tax ordinance to the electors of the city pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, Section 718.04, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Melissa. So A and B, the one that she just read, the resolution, it's obviously complementary to the ordinance, which is the next one. This is proposed language that was presented by the mayor in an effort to put a safety levy back on the ballot. This November would be November 5th. It is a reduction in what is currently being paid to those paying it. Currently, it is a 0.5 income tax rate. This is decreasing that to 0.4. That tax that we currently have that was passed with a pretty significant rate when it went to the voters almost 5 years ago does expire December 31st of this year. So if we were to pass this, if it were to pass through council, if it were to go on the ballot in November and fail, the safety forces would be at a significant decrease. Those numbers were outlined at our last finance meeting, recapped during the council meeting that we had last week. So I will turn it over at this time to Mayor Blanton for her to discuss this, and then we will discuss as a group.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hedges. As was stated in the review of the budget for this year, we are looking at without the safety levy, without this the funds in Fund 227, we would see a significant decrease of over $2 million in the overall city budget. Any of those funds that are currently being spent, those expenses would need to be moved up into, absorbed into other funds within the city budget, or we would have to look at cuts throughout the budget in some way to make up for those funds. The difference between the a little over $2 million that we are getting currently from the 0.5 income tax increase would be decreased, as Councilperson Hedges said, because this is decreasing it from 0.5. If passed, it would be decreasing it from 0.5 to 0.4. And I believe, Auditor, you said that amount was about 1.8 is what we would be collecting.
That's correct.
At the 0.4%. So we're looking at a $400,000 decrease in what we would be collecting on average by going to the 0.4. As stated in our one of the previous finance meetings, I provided all of the lines of how that money had been spent over the last 5 years as the money has been collected and how we've gotten up to the place that we are today. And in looking at the budget process starting next year, with and without the budget or without the funds in 227, we are looking at different ways to allocate monies that are approved by council for safety forces, whether that's for salaries that are contract negotiated or other expenditures throughout. And so if the voters were to allow for this to go forward, or if council allows this to go forward, we would be looking at ways to make sure that those funds are expended in a way that serves the public in the best way possible. And that would be transparently shared with how those funds are going to be spent from the administration's perspective. So I would kindly ask that the Finance Committee consider passing both the ordinance and the resolution to allow it to go to council and be considered by the full council to go to consideration of the voters in November.
Thank you, Mayor Blanton. So just to recap, this obviously is the Finance Committee. So what we are doing is approving the financial portion of this ordinance. It would still go to council for further discussion. If you remember last time, and if you were on council last year, the meat of this discussion really happened in finance. We are up against a pretty tight timeline in order to submit this to the Board of Elections should we want to put it on the ballot. So that's why we wanted to have this conversation today and allow for enough time, with the hopes that if it makes it to the council floor at that point, it is somewhat of just a process to get through at that point and have the real conversation to happen here. So At this time, I would open it up for comments or questions first from the committee, and then of course we'll welcome comments and questions from the greater council who are here as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it and the need for it. So, and it's pretty simple. The resolution is to go to the Board of Elections to put it on the ballot. No ordinances for us to approve if council feels
My,
such. So,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
My other comments, nice piece of work. Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing I just want to draw attention to is there was a lot of discussion last time about the verbiage on the ballot. I want to just recap that again, as that comes up a lot in discussion. That is not something, the verbiage on the ballot is not something that we are able to manipulate. It is not something that even on the Board of Election locally that they are able to manipulate. We made several efforts last time with the Secretary of State to discuss different language using the word reduction or lowering to make it very clear that it is a reduction of a current tax, that those that are paying it are paying it. I think there was a lot of confusion around that last time. Unfortunately, we have not really made any headway with that. It just doesn't really allow for that, especially on an income tax. There are opportunities with different types of tax to use that type of language on the ballot. It is not something that we have been successful with the Secretary of State trying to rework. So the language, unfortunately, would be very similar to that which we experienced last time. The local Board of Elections has been very, very helpful in trying to help us, make sure that we can do it in the best way possible to make it very clear that it is a reduction and this is not, in fact, a new tax. So I just want to reiterate that one more time. But as the previous two efforts that we made, this is a reduction in what was currently paid. This is not a new tax. This is not the same amount of tax. It is a reduction to what is currently being paid by those who are paying it. Other comments, questions from other council members here tonight?
No, you nailed my concern. The big thing is, we can't say enough. We need everyone out on the streets, knocking on doors and telling the story of the city of Circleville. Without it, we're going to fail.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Brooks?
At this point, I just, again, want to echo everything that we've said. It really needs to be passed, and there's going to be a lot of other parts of our community that take a big hit because of the failure. If we don't get these funds approved, then, our streets, our parks are going to start to see a hit. But I do have a question. Theoretically, if we don't pass in November, have we started to look into other ways that we could possibly push for a split fire levy and police levy if the whole doesn't pass?
So I think that possibility has been discussed. I don't know that would happen within the confines of this meeting.
Yeah.
Just solely based on this is addressing just the financial piece. But to speak a little bit to what Mayor Blanton said and to use some dollars associated with it that we shared at the last meeting, the budget that has been proposed for 2025 is based on the levy not passing, as obviously we need to budget accordingly if that doesn't happen.
Right.
Due to that, the General Fund 101 has a total of $4,398,804 compared to 2023 that had $2,611,373. That is obviously to cover, bless you, some of those funds that might have to move. And unfortunately, that means if that happens, there are other services in this city that will not be able to happen due to that. I know that is not a topic that people want to talk about, and that's not what people want to hear, but that is the reality.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to be very clear about is if that were to happen, if the levy doesn't pass, the other really interesting piece of information that Mark had provided to us was at the end of 2025, it only leaves a projected excess of about $38,000 left. That is not really sustainable going forward. So the result of this not passing really does have far-reaching repercussions for our city.
Yeah.
So to go a little bit further to what Councilperson Hedges said, if the levy is not successful in November, the beginning of 2025, we will start having conversations about what the services of the city of Circleville look like come 2026, or even if we want to reduce the funds that are being paid out of 101, we will have to look at what those services look like at mid-year of next year in preparation for 2026.
Yeah, because we've discussed, it's going to definitely be a ding to our employment in both the police department and the fire department. We're going to lose, a couple people at the fire department come 2026 if we don't see these funds approved this November.
I think the other thing to note is there have been and are still being a lot of considerable, very positive things happening, I think both in the administration and with both the fire department and the police department to make, better processes, better training, better everything to really make sure that the services that we are providing to the citizens are the best that we can do. And in addition to that, I think to kind of learn from the past and move forward in the best way that we can do that. So I'm excited about those changes. I think the citizens are going to be really excited about that. So that is really the remainder of my messaging, but I wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to be heard before this potentially would make it to the council floor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a lot of good pushes forward that we're trying to make, and I think it'll probably be really disappointing if we don't have those funds from the levy, because all of these improvements that we're trying to make are just going to be thrown out the window when we have to start making major cuts because we don't have the funds to support our police and fire. So we can't really move forward if we don't have these funds to help our police and fire continue to thrive.
Right. Mr. Duval?
There's something that I'm concerned about as I've talked to people. There seems to be a very real disconnect. They like the police department, they like the fire department, but I don't want to pass this levy. And somehow we've got to tie, it says right there, don't misunderstand me, but somehow we've always had the fire department, we've always had the police department, and therefore, why should I pay more taxes? And I'm that totally illogical.
Nope. And I think though that you're right. And that's going to be, something that we're going to go up against. Nobody wants to pay more taxes, I think ourselves included, but unfortunately to have some of the services that you want, there is a price tag to that. I think the very important thing to note, though, to piggyback onto what you said, is this will be an all hands on deck, must have a united message, must be willing to beat the pavement, must be willing to get in front of people. This will be an effort that will only pass with the complete support of everyone in this room. So while I hope that everyone does support it, I do think that everyone needs to be prepared to work for it as well.
And would encourage the fire and police to join us.
Agreed.
Most definitely.
Agreed.
And I think as the mayor had said earlier, the more transparent we can be about what these funds will do and where they're needed and what would happen one way or the other,
And the data's out
or
there.
adjustments that would need to be made if it didn't pass.
And I think also just show what we have done to what the mayor said. And, that is really available, true fact data, driven data that is available. And to your earlier point, those things will potentially not be there anymore if these funds don't exist. So it will definitely be a campaign full of effort.
I so move.
One thing,
I'm sorry.
though, too, is Circleville's growing. We're at 14,000. We're probably going to go up another couple thousand here in the next few years and so on. And, street maintenance and all the things that go with all these new, developments and so on. And perhaps our story will be accepted a little different with new folks moving in, to the community too. So yeah, it's definitely adherent as we mentioned, and perhaps we've beaten the horse on this, but it probably needs to be beaten a little more. We all collectively need to be out there, not some of us working our butts off to try to make things happen, but every single one of us need to spend some time knocking on doors or standing on street corners or whatever be the case, because, it's to point, our future is here. And without police and fire,
And I think you bring up a good point, Tom, regarding the new housing developments that are slated to be built in our community. This committee and previous this council and previous councils have really worked to make sure that other things are in place, like the NCAs, for those new housing developments. So other efforts have been made to make sure that we can support that growth, but with growth, unfortunately, does cause excess pull on services. So it's to your point, great point, getting in front of those as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We've had another council member join. Anything else? Going once, going twice? All right, Mr. Duval, I think you made a motion.
I did.
You want to repeat it for me?
Approve and send to council for their approval.
All right, so Tom Duval motions to send this forward to council with a recommendation for passage, seconded by Jeff Hallinan. Melissa, can we please do a roll call?
Hedges.
Yes,
Hallinan.
Yes.
Duval.
Yes.
perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you for the information that was provided both by Mark and the mayor. So the second the second piece of this, the last piece of legislation that we have, Kendra, before we have Melissa read this, can you explain what these two pieces are? So what we just read was the resolution. This is an ordinance. Can you explain just the difference?
So resolutions are designed to be short-term, ordinances are designed to be law. So we need to have the resolution to accept, and then the ordinance will actually be the authorization to place it on the ballot for this election year. So by law, they operate in the same manner, but since it's a short-term, we're asking for council's authority to do this. That's why we have the resolution first and then on into the ordinance.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify that so everyone's clear on that. Discussion is the same, but this is the supplementary ordinance piece to what we just discussed. So unless there's further discussion, is there a motion for this?
Oh, I'll motion to forward this on to council as well.
So Jeff Hallinan motions to forward to council on July 2nd,
Second.
seconded by Tom Duval. Melissa, can we please do a roll?
Hedges.
Yes.
Hallinan.
Yes.
Duval.
Yes.
Thank you. So that also will go forward to council on July 2nd. That completes the legislation that was on our agenda. I do want to also thank Melissa. She did an inordinate amount of work on this meeting. We had a lot of last minute things pop up. So I appreciate all the work that she put toward this. And Mark, I know you worked hard to get all this information in as well. So any other old or other business?
Motion to this adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn by Jeff Hallinan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom Duval, and we are adjourned at 5:26. Thank you very much.